Welcome back to Filling in the History. I am the amateur historian. It's great to see you again. I can't really see you, but I'm assuming that you're there. Um, Today is a really, really big episode in that we are talking about what was called the Camp of Israel and is now we call Zion's Camp. This is a sort of an expedition that the early Latter-day Saints used to try to reclaim their lands in Independence, Missouri. Now, this is a very big story and a very pivotal moment in church history. And so this episode might be the longest one that I ever do, just because there's a lot of stories surrounding this. The good news is that we are going to cover 6 months worth of time in 1834. And the other good news is that Zion's Camp will come to an end here. So I'm hoping to get back to maybe a little bit more concise stories. So if I speak a little quickly, I apologize, but we're going to be going through sections 102 through 105 in the Doctrine and Covenants. There's a lot of very interesting things here. One letter in particular that's very interesting. And we also get introduced to Zelph, if you know who Zelph is. Those of you who may or may not believe might have heard of a little something called Zelph on a shelf, which is, uh, I think, very clever. But anyway, so we're going to be talking about Zelph today. So if you've heard that name before, we'll get into that. All right, so for our first part, we're going to be talking about uh, some things leading up to section 102 of the Doctrine and Covenants. So we are in 1834. So on our last episode, we got rid of 1833. That's done, and so we're in a lot of things actually. So we're going to be getting into a new volume of the document series of the Joseph Smith papers. So if you're following along from a publication standpoint, you've gone through a few volumes already. But I wanted to point out something that I was really excited about. So last night, my family and I went to a community affair. It was kind of like hot dogs out in the park at the beginning of school because it is now approaching fall in Utah here. And I met a woman by the name of Sharon. And Sharon, I'm sorry, I forgot your last name. But Sharon is actually a part of the Joseph Smith Papers project and works on the website experience. And if it wasn't for Sharon, this would not happen. So I heap praises upon you, Sharon, for all the work that you do. It was really fun to talk to you, and I hope I'm embarrassing you. You were just absolutely lovely, and I really, really appreciate what you do for all of us in preserving a digital copy of the Joseph Smith Papers, which is a titanic, gargantuan, uh, endeavor that has blessed me, and I hope everybody enjoying this will also thank Sharon. So leave a comment for Sharon. She's a very lovely lady. So we're going to first talk about a prayer that we get in Joseph Smith's journal. So for a paper's introduction, this is the journal that spans from 1832 to 1834. There's going to be a rather large gap here in entries because he does go on Zion's Camp. In this particular case, it is the handwriting of Oliver Cowdery. So even in his own journal, he still has scribes just because he struggled with this. Probably recorded on some piece of paper, and then he copies it into this journal. So what is the introduction to this? Well, the Joseph Smith Papers, and thank you, Sharon. I can copy paste this with your help. It says, this prayer by Joseph Smith and 5 of his close associates addressed several related concerns, including their personal safety and that of other church members, the protection of the church's press, and the growing debt facing members of the united firm. All of these issues were connected to the real and threatened violence church members had been subjected to for several months. Now we get issues like Missouri now brewing in Kirtland, which is a tough one. So we get this from the historical introduction. B.F. Norris, a resident of nearby Mentor, Ohio, who was not a member of the Church of Christ, corroborated Joseph Smith's reports writing on the 6th of January, 1834, that a group had, quote, threatened mobbing church members in Kirtland. Norris also observed that, quote, Smith has 4 or 5 armed men to guard him every night. 2 days later, Oliver Cowdery reported that vigilantes had fired a cannon at midnight in an attempt to intimidate the members of the church. No one was frightened, Cowdery explained, but all prepared to defend themselves if they made a sally upon our houses. So if you've forgotten, Joseph Smith was dragged out of his home by a group of men, beaten, tarred, and feathered, which also killed his adopted son. So I don't know if the bodyguard thing is true, but it definitely would be justified, I would say. A lot of this, however, was brought upon by Dr. Philastus Hurlburt. So we get this, again, historical introduction. Hurlbut allegedly threatened to kill Joseph Smith in mid-December, prompting Joseph Smith to file a complaint against him on the 21st of December, 1833, with Kirtland Justice of the Peace John C. Dowan. A hearing on the issue was set for the 13th of January, 1834, 2 days after this prayer was offered. So they did go to court over this. We'll get into that in a moment. So footnote to the introduction here that we get. Hurlbut was lecturing about the exposing the Mormon imposters. So here's from the introduction. He also announced his intention to publish a book, quote, which would divulge the whole secret of the supposedly fraudulent origins of the Book of Mormon. Some of those present at the lecture contributed funds to Hurlbut's project, and an anti-Mormon committee in the area employed Hurlbut, quote, to ascertain the real origin of the Book of Mormon and to examine the validity of Joseph Smith's claims to the character of a prophet. Hurlbut traveled through Pennsylvania, New York, and Massachusetts in search for Spalding's manuscript. He collected several affidavits from people in New York testifying against the character of Joseph Smith and his family, and he claimed to have found Spalding's manuscript, though he never published it. Bummer. Never found it, did you? Anyway, so this was a very famous one that basically the Book of Mormon is based on something that a man named Spalding wrote. But as you can see, at least Dr. Hurlbut never seemed to get around to it. I wonder what he did with the money. Anyway, so content and footnotes for this. Frederick G. Williams, Newell K. Whitney, John Johnson, Oliver Cowdery, and Orson Hyde, plus Joseph Smith, were involved in this prayer. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people gathered in prayer, and it's broken into parts. So it's not very long, but I'll just get into it. So their prayer apparently was, firstly, that the Lord would grant that our lives might be precious in his sight, that he would watch over our persons and give his angels charge concerning us and our families, that no evil nor unseen hand might be permitted to harm us. Secondly, that the Lord would also hold the lives of all the united firm and not suffer that any of them shall be taken. Thirdly, that the Lord would grant that our brother Joseph might prevail over his enemy, Dr. P. Hurlbut, who has threatened his life, whom brother Joseph has caused to be taken with a precept, that the Lord would fill the heart of the court with the Spirit to do justice, and cause that the law of the land may be magnified in bringing him to justice. So footnote 1 for this. Precept here refers to a, quote, command in writing by a justice of peace or other officer for bringing a person or records before him, unquote. On the 21st of December, 1833, Joseph Smith filed a complaint with Kirtland Justice of the Peace John Dowan, whose decision in a preliminary hearing stated that Joseph Smith, quote, had reason to fear that Dr. P. Hurlbut would beat, wound, or kill him. Dowan, who then issued a warrant for Hurlbut's arrest, later claimed that when Hurlbut said he would kill Joseph Smith, quote, he meant he would kill Mormonism. I guess that makes it all better. Fourthly, from the prayer, that the Lord would provide, in the order of his providence, the bishop of this church with means sufficient to discharge every debt that the firm owes in due season, that the church may not be brought into disrepute. Maybe I'm saying that wrong. Sorry. And the saints be afflicted by the hands of their enemies. Fifthly, that the Lord would protect our printing press from the hands of evil men, and give us means to send forth his word, even his gospel, that the ears of all may hear it, and also that we may print his scriptures, and also that he would give those who were appointed to conduct the press wisdom sufficient that the cause may not be hindered, but that men's eyes may thereby be opened to see the truth. Sixthly, that the Lord would deliver Zion and gather in his scattered people to possess it in peace, and also while in their dispersion that he would provide for them that they perish not with hunger nor cold, and finally, that God, in the name of Jesus, would gather his elect speedily and unveil his face, that his saints might behold his glory and dwell with him. Amen. There's your prayer from Joseph Smith's journal. The next thing that we get in the papers chronologically is from the 22nd of January. It's a letter to the church now in Clay County. So the church members were sort of exiled from the Independence area, and now they are in Clay County, Missouri. Saints need to know what to do. The governor's not really ready to do anything to help. They sent letters to President Andrew Jackson, who also declined to help. They let the Missouri Saints know that Hurlbut was no longer an issue due to some court decisions against him. So Hurlbut had to pay damages and also the court costs for attacking Joseph Smith. So that was the church letter to the church in Clay County. And I'm burning through these because there's so much to go through. Letter published in the Evening and Morning Star, which was sometime in February of 1834, sort of an open letter. And this is actually a first of a series directed to priesthood holders. It's a focus on doctrinal themes as a general epistle. So if you were to read in the New Testament, you'd see like the general epistle of John or Peter. They were mimicking that sort of behavior. This particular one is on the atonement of Jesus Christ and about laws and governance. And this is a first where we get published communication instead of handwritten or individual papers. And if you want a current version of this, I would say that this is the Liahona, or what used to be the Ensign. This is just kind of a public, open thing. The first presidency will give a message to the whole church on a monthly basis through this, or whatever they do. It's been done in different ways for different times, but this is the first time we get it, printed form. So if you want to talk about if you want to go back a ways to like the first presidency message, this is, in a sense, kind of where some of that came from. It was kind of interesting. So that's the letter in the Evening and Morning Star. We then get a letter to J.G. Fosdick on the 3rd of February, 1834. So this is found in Oliver Cowdery's letter book. Now, what's interesting about this letter book is the last scribe of that book was Warren Cowdery, who handed it off to his son Curtis, so Curtis Cowdery, who sold it in 1931 to the Huntington Library in San Marino, California, which, by the way, is a gorgeous place. Anyway, found some pictures about this place. I mean, it's just absolutely stunning. So this is the Huntington Library in San Marino. Now, his name could have been Jabez G. Fosdick. We're not exactly sure, but it could have been that. Jabez is his first name. This letter is about somebody by the name of Joseph Wood, who's accused of misconduct while he was on his mission in Michigan Territory. Like he committed adultery while it was on his mission. Yikes. So the historical introduction ends in this way to sort of summarize this. It says, in his 10th of January, 1834 letter, Fosdick evidently inquired about church governance and the extent of authority held by high priests in the branches of the church. Joseph Smith's response to the letter featured here emphasized the authority of local branches over that of individual high priests in disciplinary proceedings, and was intended to be a precursor to a fuller treatment on authority to be published later. And that's kind of the way we do it today. Local congregations have the right to take people to church court, basically is what this is. After that, we get a meeting in February, a couple of days later. This is some minutes from the 9th of February, 1834 meeting. The historical introduction gives us this. This conference, chronicled in these minutes, was evidently called to help church leaders in Kirtland, Ohio, including Joseph Smith, better understand the situation of the branch of the church in New Portage, Medina County, Ohio, and to provide instructions to members living there. So there were some updates counteracting preaching against the church by Ezra Booth. This is somebody who sort of left the church and preached against it. Once that was settled, the branch continued to grow. So sort of once they clarified everything that Ezra Booth was talking about, apparently they continued to grow. And they were instructed to build a meeting house, although they never did. They never actually got around to that. So, that meeting up there, they were hoping to sort of expand themselves, but it never fully came to pass, unfortunately. We had another meeting on the 12th of February. The historical introduction to that meeting gives us this. At this 12th of February meeting, Joseph Smith also recounted some of the conditions and difficulties, including persecution and his own transgressions he faced at the time he obtained and translated the Book of Mormon. The council then judged two cases. One case involved Martin Harris, who was charged with telling Alpheus C. Russell, quote, that Joseph drank too much liquor when he was translating the Book of Mormon, unquote, and that Joseph Smith, quote, wrestled with many men and threw them. Harris was also charged with saying that he knew the contents of the Book of Mormon before it was translated, whereas Joseph Smith did not. Harris's conversation with Russell, who lived in Kirtland, probably took place after the 23rd of March, 1833, as Harris had not returned to Kirtland from a proselyting mission by that date. So, I guess there were some people saying, yeah, Joseph was drunk, and he also wrestled a lot of people. And before that, it was interesting. Joseph sort of gave the Joseph Smith history where he said, maybe I was guilty of levity and I did some things I wasn't too proud of when I was a kid after receiving the first vision before the Book of Mormon. He goes through all that. But I thought it was interesting. Like, he drank too much and he wrestles a lot of people. I guess that was a problem. Then we get this from the same meeting. Leonard Rich was charged with violating the word of wisdom, although we're not sure how or what really came of that. And also for selling publications of the church at too high a price. So when, I don't know, maybe you're supposed to sell it for 25 cents and he's selling it for $1. And this actually led to some anti-Mormon sentiment being fueled because they're like, yeah, see that? They're just trying to make money off of people. So anyway, that was the end of that meeting. We get a letter here from a man by the name of Joseph Bosworth. And I'll kind of let the historical take over on this one, this historical introduction. In this letter, Joseph Bosworth recounted 2 visions he experienced the night of the 16th of February, 1834, 1 week after meeting with Joseph Smith and others at a conference in New Portage, Medina County, Ohio. So 2 visions coming right up. I'm going to summarize this a little bit, but this is from I'll just kind of read it off to you. It's very interesting. Bosworth's belief in the reality of visions, as opposed to Campbell's disregard for such experiences in modern times, may have influenced his decision to join the Church of Christ. Bosworth's probable familiarity with at least some of Joseph Smith's visionary experiences, including his and Rigdon's Vision, section 76, published in the July 1832 issue of the Evening and Morning Star, may have contributed to his desire to share his own visions with church leaders in Kirtland, Ohio. No response to Bosworth's letter has been located. So here are your visions. I'm just going to read through them. I'll skip through a few things here. He gets a little flowery in his language, but let's read them out. Says he, first vision. I saw a strange appearance in the sky in the east, next a body of light rising up in the same place. While this luminary was rising, which was not brighter than the sun, I saw another most grand fountain of light, more majestic than anything that ever I saw, of great magnitude, and the light that flowed from it is indescribable. When or whether all these lights disappeared in my vision, I am not able to tell, as my eyes were taken off to view another sight, which then presented itself to my view. I now saw 2 armies, one from the north and the other from the south, paraded in 2 straight lines facing each other, near together, extending from east to west, as I thought, through the whole earth, all mounted on horses, equipped with arms of warfare in the highest pomp, all standing still prepared for a most tremendous battle. I saw no fighting, except one exchange of shots by a few men, very far in the west. So far I could not hear the report of guns, but saw the motion and the smoke of burning powder. I stood on the ground with some of my brethren. Here this great light shone so bright, not armored ourselves in this battle, nor was I the least intimidated. Brother Thomas Gordon stood by and said, Brother Joseph, I am not afraid, on which I asked him if he saw the smoke in the west. Thus the scene closed. So 2 armies, a north and a south, paraded as far as the eye can see, getting ready for battle, and the smoke rising in the west. Interesting vision. Vision second. First, I saw myself in various parts and in different congregations of men and women, many of which I knew, laboring with great diligence in the word of God and proclaiming the things which I had seen in a vision of the 2 lights and the great armies of horsemen. So earnest and said thing I remember now and ever shall, while a white spittle flew out of many of their mouths, the mysteries of the gospel, the mysteries of godliness, and the mysteries of eternity seemed to be understood instantaneously. And many of our brethren were there who now live in Kirtland, and many of whom I have seen and know them. Glory be to God on high. And here is the great scene, my brethren, in the full interpretation was understood of all, that God had shown me in my vision, and even I felt myself clothed with the knowledge of God. The church never responded to that officially, but that was a letter sent to Joseph Smith. A vision of a North and a South army going at it with each other. I thought that was interesting. All right, moving on to section 102. Here we go. So these are what are called revised minutes from Minute Book 1. So, blame not me for having you go through minutes of meetings, because one of them is actually published in section 102 as minutes. So if you look at it in your modern scriptures, you're going to see clerks at the end, and this is what it is. So why this? Well, it's in the handwriting of Orson Hyde, and there's some corrections in the text. For example, on page 2, we get one removal and another replaces the text with shall more than 6, referring to a church court. So meaning you have to have at least 6 people involved in a church court. That was clarified, and that's important in our lesson today. Otherwise, it's a very clean copy. So we also get a copy in Revelation Book 2, which is also the handwriting of Orson Hyde. And it's kind of towards the back of the book, so it's a bit out of order for this. But then we get the handwriting of Joseph Smith, which says, to go into the covenants. So why do we have meeting minutes in the Doctrine and Covenants? Because Brother Joseph said so. So take that. We also get a copy in something called the Hyde and Pratt Notebook. This is the handwriting of Orson Hyde. He's copying the junk out of this thing. And basically, he kind of kept his own copy in this notebook. This is section 5 in the original Doctrine and Covenants, so very much towards the front, very much part of like how to manage and regulate the church. And we also get a copy in the manuscript history. So an introduction, if you don't mind. So the Minute Book says this for this introduction. The above items have been corrected according to the resolution passed in the same, and the following is the correction. Kirtland, February 17, 1834. So that's what you're reading. Revelation Book 2 and the Hyde Notebook just give the date. Doctrine and Covenants gives us minutes of the organization of the High Council of the Church of Christ of Latter-day Saints. Hang on to that thought. Kirtland, February 17, 1834. We don't get a name for the church until 1838, so the fact that they're already calling themselves Latter-day Saints is interesting later in this episode, so stay tuned. The manuscript history also gives us the same thing that's in the Doctrine and Covenants. Okay. We get some changes in the modern section headings. Both of them gives us dates, places, and says that Oliver Cowdery and Orson Hyde scribed this. We are now in History of the Church, Volume 2, by the way. So this is the first edition, the first revelation that we get that traditionally was used from the history of the church. So we have now switched over. So everything up to this point has all been contained in Volume 1 of the History of the Church. So the 1981 version of this says, 2 days later, the minutes were corrected by the prophet, read to the High Council, and accepted by the council. Verses 30 through 32, having to do with Council of the 12 Apostles, were added by the prophet Joseph Smith in 1835 when he prepared this section for publication in the Doctrine and Covenants. The 2013 version of this is changed. It says the prophet revised the minutes the following day, and the next day the corrected minutes were unanimously accepted by the High Council as a, quote, form and constitution of the High Council of the Church. Verses 30 through 32, having to do with the Council of the 12 Apostles, were added in 1835 under Joseph Smith's direction when this section was prepared for publication in the Doctrine and Covenants. So the reason why we have minutes of a meeting is because this is how we run high councils from now on. Now, you have a high council over the whole church. That is the Quorum of the 12 and the First Presidency, I believe. But then every stake in the church also has a high council, which I believe usually is composed of 12 people, 12 men, priesthood holders, high priests. So I don't know for sure, but this is basically how to do that job. This is how you do it right. The historical introduction gives us a little more. It says, on the 17th of February, 1834, at a meeting that included priesthood holders and other members of the church, Joseph Smith oversaw the initial organization of a standing, quote, President's Church Council in Kirtland, Ohio. Orson Hyde, the clerk of the meeting, noted in the minutes that that many questions have been asked during the time of the organization of this council, and doubtless some errors have been committed. It was therefore voted by all present that Brother Joseph should make all necessary corrections by the spirit of inspiration hereafter. Joseph Smith worked on amending the minutes the following day, quote, with all the strength and wisdom that he had, unquote, and presented the revised minutes featured here to a council of 62 priesthood holders and church members on the 19th of February. Joseph Smith's revisions were significant and both added and deleted material from the original minutes. After hearing the revised minutes read 3 times and making at least one correction, the council unanimously voted to accept the revised minutes as a, quote, form and constitution of the High Council of the Church of Christ hereafter, unquote, with the proviso that if the president should hereafter discover any lack in the same, he should be privileged to fill it up. At the 19th February meeting, after giving several blessings and items of instruction to members of the new council, Joseph Smith reported that, quote, the council was organized according to the ancient order, and also according to the mind of the Lord, unquote. Conducting itself according to procedures outlined in the minutes featured here, the council, later known as the Kirtland High Council, then heard its first case. So, further into this, we get these minutes also authorized high priests at remote locations to, when necessary, organize similar temporary disciplinary councils, the decisions of which could be appealed to the standing high council at the seat of the general government of the church, then in Kirtland, now in Salt Lake City. So this means that councils and standing councils can conduct church business in any area that they exist in, which is very much how the church works today. There are traveling general authorities that go and sort of make sure everything is in order, but for the most part, it is sort of upon the leaders of the church in that area to take care of things for themselves. They also started doing this same kind of thing in Illinois, in Iowa, and eventually in Nauvoo. So there you go with the High Council. So some content and footnotes from this. The minutes state this. This High Council was appointed by revelation for the purpose of settling important difficulties which may or might arise in the church, which cannot or could not be settled by the church or the bishop's council to the satisfaction of the parties. Footnote 2 for this says, at the 19th of February meeting in which these revised minutes were accepted, Joseph Smith blessed the members of the High Council with, quote, wisdom and power to counsel in righteousness upon all subjects that might be laid before them, suggesting that Joseph Smith understood that the council's responsibilities would include more than overseeing church discipline. And so it is to this day. The minutes also give us, whenever this council convenes to act upon any case in the church, the 12 counselors shall consider whether it is a difficult one or not. If it is not, 2 only of the counselors shall speak upon it according to the form above written. But if it is thought to be more or a difficult one, 4 shall be appointed, and if still more difficult, 6. But in no case, not over that number shall be more than 6 be, that's the addition, be appointed to speak. The accused in all cases has the right to 1/2 of the council to prevent insult or injustice. So how does this work? It says here, these counselors who draw even numbers, that is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12, are the individuals who are to stand up in behalf of the accused and prevent insult or injustice. And in all cases, the accuser and the accused shall have a privilege of speaking for themselves before the council after the evidences are heard probably, and the counselors who are appointed to speak in the case have finished their remarks. So after the evidences are heard, the counselors, accuser, and the accused have spoken. The president shall give a decision according to the understanding which he shall have of the case, and call upon the 12 counselors to sanction the same by their voices. So it's a very interesting thing. You get 12 in the room, and they draw straws, basically. They just randomly draw numbers. And whoever are the even ones have to protect and sort of stand up for the accused, and everybody else doesn't. So I love how random that is. I love that it's like, yeah, you're all here, but it's random. And you have to fight for this guy. I think that's very interesting how to run a railroad. Further into this, we get, the high priests, when abroad, have power to call and organize a council after the manner of the foregoing, to settle difficulties when the parties, or either of them, shall request it. And the said council of high priests shall have power to appoint one of their own number to preside over such council. And you get to have appeals, too. So this is a whole court system. Should the parties or either of them be dissatisfied with the decision of said council, they may appeal to the High Council at the seat of the general government of the church and have a rehearing, which case shall there be conducted according to the former pattern written, as though no such decision had been passed or made. And then they list off the original group, what they drew, and close the meeting before starting their first hearing. So they cast lots, they drew even numbers, odd numbers. That's all listed in the Revelation. And then they went to town. So there you go. That is our first part for the day. You get all the way to a high council, a couple of cases heard, and some very interesting visions from a kind of just member of the church who used to be one of the Campbellites. So staying tuned with us. After this, we're going to be getting into 3 meetings and a revelation, basically. Kind of simple. We'll see you then.